Have no anxiety at all, but in everything by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving make your requests known to God. Then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds. Boy, are those important words for us today. There's a lot of people who want to make you afraid. There's a lot of people who want to make you fearful. There's a lot of people who want to say that we're no good, that we're not worthy of the good things of God that God has given us. Why? Why is that, you suppose? Why do people want to live in fear? Or why would you want to live in fear? I don't know. You know, and I'll bet you yours did too. I'm German, and I come from a German community, and my family came here back around 1895, 90 or 95, and they came from Germany, and they left persecution. And it was interesting to me that they did, and when they got here, there's a story in my community, and I don't know if you ever had them here or not. Do you all know about the Ku Klux Klan? You ever heard about the Ku Klux Klan? Ku Klux Klan are more famous for not liking people of color. But the truth is, they also didn't like Jews, and they didn't like Catholics. Did you know that? They didn't like Catholics. And so, since my community was perhaps 50 or so Catholic, they started to do demonstrations and all kinds of good stuff. Well, one of the community members got word that they were going to have a big old rally, and that your landscape, your ground is kind of like ours, except we have a few minor, what we call them mounds. They're really hills, right? Not really. And they were going to burn some crosses up on top of this mound and do one of their big rallies and recruitment things and all that. So the Catholic pastor who got together which is another fallacy, got together with the Lutheran pastor, because I don't know if somebody might tell me this after church. Many times when Germans migrated to this neck of the woods, and you all know that you live in the German Triangle, right? Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Milwaukee. You all know that, right? All live in the German Triangle. But many people who came here, they came as Lutherans or they came as Catholics. Okay? And most of them didn't come as poor people. Okay? We bought our land. Okay? We bought our land. We didn't come as indentured servants. Many of your relatives bought their land, if you look up. Well, anyway, so the Lutheran pastor and the Catholic pastor got together, and they got all their congregations to come to Syracuse Mountain, and what they did is they waited, and all of the Ku Klux Klan members, somehow or other, went up the hill. They started to burn their cross and to sing their old songs, and all of the people circled the hill. They circled the hill. And then they lit their lanterns and as the light went around, and they began to sing their songs. Now, what do you think happened? Suddenly, there was nobody on the hill. There was nobody on the hill. It's and it's a true story. It's a true story. See, folks, when you stand up to fear, there's nothing to fear. But you can't stand up to fear by yourself. See, that's the insidious part of fear. is fear chooses to separate you. Because then, I hope I don't scare anybody. Okay? What fear chooses to do is to say to you, you got to watch out for that person back there. Stay away from them. Fear chooses to separate you. Fear chooses to make you alone. And that you don't share in Christ's creation. You're old enough. You had the Baltimore Catechism. You had the Baltimore Catechism. Remember what the first 2 or 3 things in the Baltimore Catechism say? Who is God? How did God make me? Right? God made me in God's image and likeness. Okay? Keep Holy Sabbath. From the very beginning of our faith, God created us to be in community. He created us not to be alone. If you want to go to the story of Genesis, why did God create Eve? For community, for crying out loud. For community. Why did the precious blood come to this part of the world and build? Because we knew we needed one another. We needed you and you needed us. That's why. We came here to be together. When we let people separate us, when we let people make us afraid, we are less than God created us to be. We are less than, not more than. And if we continue to allow that to happen, we will lose our identity as a Catholic Church, as a people of God. We must stand up for one another. Not just ourselves, but for one another. So when we hear the story then of the man with the vineyard, what do we hear? We hear a story of people who tried to separate the man from various kinds of people so they could take from him. He comes and he says, no, I am not going to allow you to create that kind of fear. But that's not the lesson. The lesson is that even though Jesus was rejected and they tried to separate Jesus, and I don't know if I can think of any more separation than putting Jesus on the cross, right? I mean, if you want to separate somebody, all you got to do is take and persecute them. Okay? And then, what's the subtle message of that? If I make fun of you, if I bully you, if I separate you from people, then everybody around goes, oh crap. What if they do that to me? What if they do that to me? And what do you do then? So now, there's the Catholic response. What should the Catholic response be? You want to try that one? Well, in my church, by the way, you can talk. All right? In my church, you can talk. What should the Catholic response be? If you see someone that people are trying to separate, to keep free, who are bullied, what should your response be? Anybody?
Welcome them.
Welcome them. Go to them. Make sure that they know they're not alone. That's the Catholic response. And I don't care if that person has 6 ears, 5 toes, and wears purple hair. All right, I really don't care. The truth of the matter is that if you met my family, oh boy, okay, I've got a couple of nieces and nephews with purple hair. Okay? And one of them happens to be an RN in an emergency room. Don't you think that's fun when people walk in? Woo! Okay, that's the response. What? Jesus was rejected. He was the cornerstone. He was the first stone rejected. What is the disciples' job? What is our job? Our job is to make sure that those connections are remade. Our job is to make sure in our daily lives that what we do is to make sure that we know all those people in our lives, whether they're in our family, whether they're at school, whether they're at work, that they make sure we know that we are supporting them. That we are supporting them. Okay? That's an important piece. Okay, I'm going to finish this with one thing, and I'm going to, you'll hear it again in a little bit, but I want to tell you something. I want to tell you a story. Okay? Now, some of you are sitting there going, okay, how am I going to support this particular person? Because I don't agree with him. I don't agree with him. They hold opinions that I don't like. I have a sister who has two boys. Okay? Colin and Justin. Okay? Well, Colin was every parent's nightmare. Seriously. Every parent's nightmare. That boy could get in more trouble than you could think of. He just was a natural born. It came to him as naturally as breathing. He just did it. So one day he's having a particularly awesome day. And his mother, who is about my height, and that, so she's pretty tall for a lady, and she finally has enough. She finally has enough. And Colin at this time is about 10 or 11. And she goes up to Colin and she picks him up, if you can imagine, and she sets him hard on the counter. So she's eye to eye with the boy. And she looks at him in the most serious voice she can come up with as a mother. And you know, you can come up with some pretty serious ones, right? Comes up with it and she says, Colin, I don't like you. The kid goes, the tears start to come and he starts to sob and he's just going, oh my God, what's coming next? What's coming next? And she holds that for a little bit and then she walks up to him, or she stays right there and she says, but I love you. But I love you. And then, of course, she starts to cry. Like, woo! See, that's the key, folks. You do not have to like everything that happens in your world. Jesus did not like everything that happened to him. What did he say to Peter, for example? Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me. But where was Peter? Jesus loved him. Jesus loved him. Brought him back. You do not have to like what happens all the time. But by God, you better love what God made. Because you are also made in the image and likeness of God. That's what we have to give our communities as Catholics. We have to tell them they matter because they are made in God's image. One final question. What's the Great Commandment? This gospel is based on the Great Commandment. Anybody? Love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, don't give anything less to your neighbor that you wouldn't give to yourself. When you meet God, how will you answer that question? How did you love your neighbor?